Turning now to Capitol Hill, where the investigations, plural, into Congressman George Santos continue to pile up. Two Democratic lawmakers from his home state of New York, Congressman Dan Goldman and Richie Torres, are filing an ethics complaint about Santos over his financial disclosure reports. In the complaint, the pair allege Santos violated the Ethics in Government Act and that he, quote, failed to uphold the integrity expected of members of the House of Representatives. An attorney for Santos has said in a statement that the campaign's spending did not break any campaign finance laws. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Richie Torres and Dan Goldman of New York, who hand-delivered the Ethics Committee request to Santos's office on Capitol Hill yesterday. Fun to say, Congressman Goldman, what was the response you guys got?
It was very quick. Mr. Santos just asked us to give the complaint to his staff. But it is truly remarkable to see him in his office working as a member of Congress here when he deceived his voters so blatantly and pervasively in order to get this seat. And we've heard nothing from Republican leadership in terms of condemning him and rebuking him. And we know why. They need him. They need him to get Kevin McCarthy elected as Speaker. They need him for their majority. And since it's just a continuation of their attack on free and fair elections to support somebody who completely defrauded his voters.
Well, Congressman Torres, they've done more than just ignore it. They've gutted the House Ethics Committee. So what's the impact of that going to be on this particular case?
Yeah, I find it outrageous that the House Republicans who promised to drain the swamp have effectively defunded the Office of Congressional Ethics at a time when George Santos has entered Congress with an ethical cloud hanging over him. Having said that, the Committee on Ethics remains in place. It's evenly bipartisan, and it's the best hope for holding George Santos accountable for defrauding both the United States Congress and the public. And for me, the most important question is, where did all the money come from? How did he manage to lend his campaign more than $700,000? As late as 2020, he reported earning a salary of about $55,000 a year, and then he subsequently reported earning millions of dollars, which is an inexplicable growth in his personal wealth. And so that's the basis for the investigation. He claims to have earned millions of dollars from clients, but he's disclosed none of the names of those clients on his congressional disclosure as required by federal law.
It's fair to wonder if there ever were any clients, if there was ever a company at all. Congressman Goldman, Speaker McCarthy for the last several weeks has been asked about George Santos, has avoided the topic. He wanted his vote to become Speaker. He and Steve Scalise were asked again yesterday. Let's listen.
So have you made any decision as to how you're going to handle George Santos in his time?
No, but I'll tell you when we do.
Have you considered maybe not seating him on any committees? Is that an option that's on the table right now?
You know, you're a good reporter. You asked the question many times. What I'll do is I'll let you all know when the time is right.
Have you talked to him at all? Have you had a conversation with him
I'll let you guys all know.
Well, you saw him seated last week. There were no challenges to that. This is something that's being handled internally. Obviously, there were concerns about what we had heard. And so we're going to have to sit down and talk to him about it. And that's something that we're going to deal with.
So still, Congressman Goldman, some non-answers there. Is it your sense, talking to Republicans, that they'd like to see this guy go away, or are they happy to just have him seated and pretend it never happened?
Well, talking to some Republicans, especially in New York, one of whom has called himself for an House Ethics Committee investigation into George Santos, I think the sentiment is that he ought to be held accountable if he did anything wrong, and that he should cooperate with the House and with authorities. If he can easily resolve this by turning over the documents and materials underlying the financial disclosures, underlying this entity that he created after he announced his campaign. This was not a pre-existing entity. He was running for office. He created this entity, which all of a sudden and somewhat miraculously received millions of dollars from what he said was doing the same thing that he was doing before when he made $55,000. I'm a former prosecutor. The red flags are just all over the place here. And he doesn't have to require a subpoena. He doesn't have to require an investigation. He can provide all these materials and clear his name. And if Republican leadership does not demand that he do that, then they are complicit in his fraud.
Congressman Goldman, Jonathan Lemire, staying with you because, indeed, of your background with investigations and as a prosecutor. Shifting gears with the House, we heard from Jim Jordan and other Republicans yesterday about this new effort to investigate what they deem the weaponization of the federal government. And it seems like trying to look into some of the probes into former President Trump and his allies. What is your assessment of that, and what concerns do you have that power may be misused?
John, it's an outrageous abuse of power. Never before has Congress put in a resolution that it has the authority to investigate ongoing criminal investigations. And we know what they're looking at. And it's not just an investigation into Donald Trump, although that is part of it. It's also an investigation that includes many of them. Scott Perry, a Republican from Pennsylvania, had his cell phone seized pursuant to a court-ordered search warrant based on a finding of probable cause that he committed a crime, and yet he says that he would like to serve on that committee. The purpose of it is to interfere with ongoing investigations, and that's why I've called it the Republican Committee to Obstruct Justice.
Let me ask you, Congressman Torres, what can you do? What can House Democrats do? What can the Senate do? What can the president do to stop House Republicans from first of all, undermining the efforts of the FBI, undermining the efforts of the Department of Justice, and actually trying to get into a position where Jim Jordan and some Republicans can get their hands on the most classified, top secret documents that we have to protect.
Look, we're going to make every effort to resist, but, make no mistake, the odds are stacked against us. The new House Republican rules are an unconditional surrender of Congress as an institution to the far right of the Republican Party, and the far right are arsonists who are intent on burning everything down, including the leadership of their own party and the full faith and credit of the United States. I have concerns about the Holman Rule, which would enable House Republicans to weaponize the federal government against particular federal employees. It would enable House Republicans to zero out funding for a criminal investigation into Donald Trump. And as Dan noted, under the rules, a representative like Scott Perry, who's being investigated by the FBI, could investigate the investigators investigating him. So the Republicans, instead of draining the swamp, are filling it to an extent never seen before.
Democratic Congressman Richie Torres and Dan Goldman of New York, thank you both very much for being on the show this morning. You guys have your plate full, for sure.
Oh, my gosh.
Coming up...